All right, guys, I know it's been a long 6 months, but welcome back to Enter Cheat Code. Life has gotten in the way, but we are back at it again, here to bring you 2 videos a week of your latest gaming content. There's been a lot to talk about lately with the latest E3. Despite being, in my opinion, the most disappointing E3 ever, we still got a lot to talk about. I have my guest, YaBoyRoshi, who has the dopest anime reaction channel on YouTube. I'm going to place him in the description below. Check it out if you're into anime. Today, we're here to talk about the state of Nintendo and Nintendo's latest E3 conference. So we're going to jump right in to Metroid Dread. YaBoyRoshi, what were your thoughts initially on seeing Metroid Dread?
I was excited. So obviously I was expecting to see Metroid Prime 4, but seeing Metroid Dread, I was actually excited. Being that recently I've gotten more and more into Metroidvania style games. So seeing Metroid Dread, I was like, okay, wow, I'm into it. You know, it will fill the Hollow Knight hole in my heart until Silk Song gets released. So
if it ever gets released.
So I saw it. I thought what they showed looked good. Apparently it was a canceled game that they brought back from the dead. So that's interesting as well. Now obviously it's a game that they're putting out to kind of, you know, quell the noise about where's Metroid Prime 4. So just like kind of like, here's a Metroid game for you for now, but you know, it'll do its job.
It definitely feels like it was meant to fill a gap. I as well was excited upon the reveal. I was hyped. Gameplay looked fun. It wasn't until I went on Amazon to pre-order my copy that I saw it had a $60 price tag, and that threw a little bit of, you know, water on the flames in my opinion. So I'm going to jump right in. Is Metroid Dread a AAA game that deserves a $60 price tag in your opinion?
This is funny because I don't know why you expected anything different from Nintendo and a flagship title, but yes, I do think it's a AAA game. Do I think it necessarily warrants a $60 price tag? Not necessarily, but this is to be expected with Nintendo. They're slapping $60 price tags on games from previous console generations. So to expect anything less than that from Metroid Dread, it's kind of set yourself up for disappointment there.
I agree with you. This is par for the course for Nintendo. We've seen Donkey Kong from 2015 ship with a $50 price tag, Mario Kart 8 from 2015 ship with a $50 price tag, amongst many other titles. In fact, almost every single Wii U game that is notable has made it onto the Switch at a full price tag. So to be giving us 5-6-year-old games at full price tag, this $60 price tag is to be expected, but to me it's still disappointing, and I think it's worth discussing, and we should hold Nintendo accountable, because we exist in a world right now where you have indie titles shipping at $29.99 about, and they're packed with hundreds of hours worth of content. I'm gonna go on record to say right now, Metroid is probably gonna peak at 8 hours. It's gonna cap at 8 hours, while I have 14 max, but I'm gonna go with 8. While Hollow Knight has
14.
Hundreds of hours worth of content and some of just the best game design shipping at a $30 price tag. We see Guacamelee shipping at like a $20 price tag, another Metroidvania style game. And I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but the Metroidvania genre has developed so far that I don't know that Nintendo's going to ship this title and be the king again, sitting at the throne. I think they've been dethroned.
Who knows? Because for me right now, the king is this Hollow Knight. I sunk 80 hours into that game, and that was ridiculous. But I'm going to give you like 14 hours. I'll say it'll probably be around 14 hours if you're like a completionist, and that's going to be about it.
I see. See, I think off initial, you know, reveal, to me it looked like it should have had a $39.99 price tag on it. I will say I'm very excited about the October 8th release date. That's super exciting, but I think we live in a world where indie developers are just doing incredible things, packing games with tons of content, and I just think it's almost insulting for them to feel that they could put a $60 price tag on something like this, because I don't consider it a AAA game just because it's a major line franchise from another publisher, because in all honesty, this game seems as if it was outsourced to another company, and it says it's co-developed by Nintendo. I think they had very little to do with it, other than putting their name on it, obviously.
That's possible.
And this is going to be another one of those outsourced titles that they can put their name on it. Therefore, they can put a $60 price tag on it. The development cost, there's just no way this has the development cost of a game like Ratchet & Clank, 2018 Spider-Man, or God of War. Obviously, that there's no question behind that. So I just don't know that putting a price tag on that will warrant the development cost of work put into it. It just doesn't seem like a fair price in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, with Nintendo, nothing's ever fair. So again, it's just par for the course for me. And like, I set no expectations when it came to price because I already knew what time it was.
Yeah. Yep. So I guess we can move on to our second topic. I mean, the conclusion is par for the course. If you expected any less, shame on you, because Nintendo has shown us time and time again they're going to price their games full price, whether they warrant that price from a development cost or even from it being a port. They're going to price it how they're going to price it. And of course, the Nintendo fanboys are going to eat it up and buy it. So they're speaking with their wallets. But Nintendo did something a little bit more controversial in this latest E3, and that is they did not allow content creators to live stream and add a commentary onto their conference. As a major content creator, how do you view a move like that by Nintendo?
I've always felt for years and years, Nintendo is just completely out of touch with their fans. They're out of touch with society
as a whole,
and it just shows in their actions that they just hate their consumers. Everything that Nintendo does shows that they hate their consumers, and it's like Stockholm syndrome. It's literally like Nintendo fanboys have Stockholm syndrome. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. So we just talked about it, how they bring old games back at full price and people will defend it. You know, this game's like 8 years old. They're bringing it to the Switch at $60. Why? Yeah. Why are they doing that? Why are they blocking content creators from co-streaming and adding commentary? They're afraid of the pennies on the dollar that content creators will make monetizing game trailers for remasters and remakes. Anyway, it's kind of like Nintendo's exhaustive, man. They need to get it together. Like all this free press that they can possibly get, and I think the community would be even more, robust and abundant if they allowed stuff like this and weren't so, copyright hungry or no, you can't do this unless we sanction it kind of deal.
It's crazy because Nintendo already locks the ability to create content behind their own payment program. You can't get compensated the way you would for other content, right?
Correct. I believe so.
So they have their partner program. See, it's unfortunate because you mentioned something. Nintendo is taking all of this free press on the backs of content creators. They eat it all up. They take advantage of these content creators for free publicity, free press, and it seems like they don't even know how to leverage that properly anyways by blocking this move. So it's all benefit, but there's no return onto the people who love their content and their property so much that they feel so inclined to create based on this property. It's insulting to the fan base and just completely tone deaf, completely out of touch. And it's greed. It seems like it's all motivated by greed. Going back to those price points on those old games, putting Metroid at a $60 price tag, Nintendo just comes off, in my opinion, as one of the most money-hungry, tone-deaf companies that exists.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe things might change as younger people move into positions of power at Nintendo, but for now, I think things are just going to be more and more the same going forward.
See, so I pose this question to you because I kind of disagree. I don't know that things will change because fans have given Nintendo every indication that they're doing everything right. The Switch has been the most successful, fastest selling console. It's the number 1 console selling for the last 30 months in a row. So it's like the fans continuously tell Nintendo that they're doing everything right, and why would they think otherwise when people are making the decision? They're validating these decisions with their wallet.
Then more power to Nintendo. Keep doing what you're doing. Because, hey, I think one day they'll realize, like, yo, this is fucked up. Like, maybe we shouldn't be this lame.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
So one of our talking points was reboots, remasters, but I feel like we kind of touched on that. And here's just one little aspect of that. Nintendo fans have been constantly getting games way late, like Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, Dragon Ball Fighters, and many other AAA multi-platform titles. They always get the games very late. There's no day and date. By the time these games actually come out on the Nintendo Switch at a $50, $60 price tag, they're budget games or Game Pass games on other consoles at $10, $15. Not only that, they're compromised versions of the games, lower frame rate, lower resolution, and just technically they just don't perform as well. How is this acceptable at this point in the console's life? It launched in March of 2017. Here we are in 2021. They're still getting these old games mad late at full price. Why is that still acceptable? And no one questions it.
It's funny because it's acceptable. You literally just said the answer to it. The fans are telling Nintendo that everything that's being done is right. Now, part of this is we can't just put the full blame on Nintendo for these games coming to the Switch late. It's just that the developers aren't prioritizing development for their games on the Switch. They're prioritizing the Sony, the Microsoft, the PC versions, but they're not prioritizing the Switch because the Switch is not as powerful a piece of hardware as those other two. But
for that reason, I am going to shift the blame back to Nintendo. I am. Because here's the thing. You launched the Switch to stand side by side as your next console, right? And this was a mid-console refresh, right? Because the Wii U came and then the Switch came. This is like a mid-generational refresh, which I don't think we've ever seen this before. We've seen little iterations and bumps, but never have we seen this. So the fact that they gave these creators a canvas that was so weak, so underpowered, that it could not be a viable source for third-party multi-platform games to ship day and date, once again shows how out of touch Nintendo is. They think the only thing that their gamers want to play are Nintendo properties, and I just don't think that's the case.
You know what's funny? For the majority of Nintendo owners, I think that is the case. All they really give a shit about is Mario and Zelda for the most part. Like you said, the Switch is like the most popular console selling, right?
Correct.
It's still selling even though these games are coming out super late, like years late in some cases. And again, Nintendo's telling the fans, hey, you're doing everything that's happening is okay. This is fine. Is what the fans are saying.
So that leads me perfectly to my next point. And this is, why do Nintendo fans have these rose-tinted goggles on where they can never criticize, never critique, and never find anything Nintendo does unacceptable, despite how wrong it is? Like, we look at Zelda Breath of the Wild, which shipped in 2017, right? It was heralded as the best open world game ever made. Yet it didn't do a single thing unique or distinct, right? It shipped the same year Horizon Zero Dawn came out, which did everything better, from graphics to enemy types to combat to story. There wasn't an element of Horizon Zero Dawn that wasn't better than Breath of the Wild. Yet it was heralded as the best open world title ever. It's really an open world on training wheels. And why is it that these rose-tinted goggles will not allow them to see the truth? Nintendo can do no wrong.
That's interesting because, you know, you and I have the same opinions on Horizon and Breath of the Wild when they came out. And you and I beat both games. So to anybody that thinks that we didn't play the games, we played both games and beat both games.
Correct.
But in all honesty, Horizon was the better game. But when it comes to Nintendo, like you said, nobody can criticize. Everybody wants to say Nintendo does everything perfectly. And it comes down, it's the same thing every year at E3. So this year's E3 wasn't that great, right? But you know, Microsoft had some showings and there was some good stuff sprinkled in there. And everybody's like, oh, Nintendo won this year's E3. How'd they win this year's E3 when 50-60% of the games they showed are remasters or remakes of old games mixed in with some new stuff? Like, they do this every time, and then everybody's like, oh my god, Nintendo won E3. They showed what? The Super Monkey Ball game is a remake. Then they showed what? Fatal Frame. Then we have Life is Strange, which is an old-ass game. Kakarot, which is an old-ass game. Danganronpa, which is an old-ass game. Like, they do this every time, and nobody says anything, and nobody wants to mention the fact that the Switch store is full of iPhone games and ports from old consoles.
Yes.
The Switch is just a glorified mobile gaming. It's like a fucking phone.
It has been definitely relegated to tons and tons of shovelware.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Definitely.
And nobody wants to admit that, and that's totally fine. But we're not gonna sit here and act like Nintendo came with the with the best showcase because they showed 30 seconds of Breath of the Wild 2, which looks just like the first Breath of the Wild.
Let's talk about that for one moment. How shameful is it that Breath of the Wild was a launch title on the Switch, March of 2017, right? It was a cross-generational title from the Wii U to the Switch. There's really no discernible difference from a quality standpoint between how it runs on the Wii U and how it ran on the Switch. And it's still the best looking game that exists on the Switch, graphically speaking. The game dropped in 2017. How does your console peak with its launch title? You look at the PS2 days, right? Their launch titles, and then you look at their swan song titles, God of War 2 and Final Fantasy 12. I mean, they were mind-blowing, and even Final Fantasy 10 in 2001. I mean, there's moments from that game where they're sliding down the rails I still remember. You look at the last console generation, Grand Theft Auto 5, Last of Us, Red Dead Redemption 2, the end of the generation, and God of War 2018, the end of the generation looks light years ahead from, say, Killzone and Infamous when it launched. How is it that almost 5 years into the life of this console, the games don't look any better than the launch title?
Well, that's an easy question to answer. The reason why is because the Switch wasn't made to stand on par with the Xbox One and the PS4. It was actually made to stand with the 360 and the PS3, just like the Wii U was. So Nintendo does their own thing. They focus on things that they think people want instead of just... I think Nintendo needs to understand that people just want to play fucking games, bro. Like, I don't need all this extra Joy-Con shit and like motion controls and all that stuff. Like, that's why, to me, I love Sony and the Microsoft consoles, because it's like, just give me my controller, give me my console, and play the game. I don't want all
you ain't trying to play Ring Fit, are you?
Correct. I'm not trying to do all this extra stuff. And if you are, that's cool, but you're doing this and you're sacrificing the power of your hardware at the same time. And you're screwing over people who buy your console who may want to play those third-party titles. Now, granted, you can say, oh, we'll just buy a Sony machine or a Microsoft machine. But it's like, some people just have a Switch. And for them to just be getting like Kakarot came out almost 2 years ago. Yeah,
it's like, crazy. I think the Switch can be a great console if you use it the way I do, and for me, and that is, it's a secondary machine, and really it's a portable machine for me. So let's just wrap this up with our final thoughts, and let's just keep this short and sweet. Where do they go from here to be relevant and compete?
It's good.
And let's not say not compete, because we know that Nintendo has existed in their own playing field, and that's fine and dandy, but like, how does Nintendo truly compete within the current console ecosystem?
I'll tell you how. Here's what's going to happen. At the beginning of the E3 Direct, they made it a point to say that the Switch has been out for 5 years. They made it a point to say that. That was the first thing that they said. It's like, oh, as you know, the Switch is entering its 5th year.
You're thinking that they're kind of leading us into something new.
What's going to happen is they're probably going to come out with, like, reports have been saying, like a Switch Pro that can probably stand on par with an Xbox One or PS4. And then games like Breath of the Wild 2 and Metroid Prime 4 are going to release for that console. So Nintendo
exclusively?
Bro, well, no. It'll release on the Switch, but
Breath of the Wild.
Because Nintendo does this shit every single time. Like, they'll be working on something and then it'll get mysteriously delayed, and then it's like, oh, well, here it is on this brand new console. Like, they do it every time. So it's gonna happen. Breath of the Wild 2 and Metroid Prime 4 are gonna come, but they're gonna drop when the Switch Pro
launch
drops.
Titles.
Yeah, so that might. So if it's 2022, I think they're probably gonna announce their Switch Pro next year, right before that drops, and then next year we'll see some Metroid Prime 4 footage.
I'm thinking Switch Pro comes out holiday of this year, unless COVID put a damper in that, because I know there's a lot of chip shortages. So my final take is this: how does Nintendo compete? I don't think a Switch Pro will compete, by the way, because it's not a new console. I think it'll be iterative. Like, it's going to be a little bump. It's not going to be a major player. I don't think games will ship exclusively to it. We saw on the 3DS XL, we only saw one exclusive title on that console. I don't know that Nintendo will cannibalize their audience. That doesn't seem like anyone wants to do that now, Xbox, Sony, or Nintendo, with these cross-generational titles. But I think that Nintendo needs to move the Switch and recognize it as their portable device, and they need to put out a real machine. those are my final
But
thoughts.
we thought that that's what was going to be the case eventually. We thought that the Switch would cannibalize the 3DS. I remember when it first came out, we thought
3DS has lost support. I think it's dead. I think they've passed on that. So I'm thinking, like I said, move the Switch into the hybrid model and have a real dedicated machine.
That'd be perfect. You said the word compete. I don't think Nintendo's out to compete.
You're right.
Nintendo never competes. Well, they used to compete, but now they're not competing.
I do think they need to get back into that, though, for the sake of their fans, because I think that their fans do want third-party, multi-platform games, day and date, that aren't compromised versions. I think the fans do want that.
To me, still, my favorite Nintendo console was the GameCube, because that was when multi-platform games came out, I could literally choose which one of my 3 consoles I wanted to purchase it for.
Exactly.
And I bought a lot of games for the GameCube.
And it had one of the most ergonomic controllers.
Exactly.
And not to mention, let's not forget about one gem they had. And correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Resident Evil 4 GameCube exclusive?
Correct.
For a long time.
Yes, Resident Evil 4 was GameCube exclusive.
Yeah.
Think about that.
And then they lost it to the PS2.
Think about that, and then think about where Nintendo is now, where all we have is
shovelware.
Correct.
Or first party titles, and those are spread out very far.
And the first party titles are great. Nobody's saying that they're not great, but I don't want to just have your console just. If I have a Switch and it's portable and I can take it places, I don't want to just play Mario. I don't want to just play Zelda. I want to play something else.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't I don't know.
Yeah.
They'll figure it out.
Well, guys. Maybe. I know that the fanboys are going to downvote this into oblivion, but here at Enter Cheat Code, we try to take a non-biased approach. We criticize everyone fairly. You can look on my channel. You'll see Xbox's roast. Today it was Nintendo's turn, and coming up is Sony's debauchery of how they have handled this cross-generational gap that exists. So Sony, you'll get your turn too. But guys, I'm so glad to be back. I'm looking forward to dropping new content on the channel. So welcome back to Enter Cheat Code. And always remember, with great power comes great responsibility. Thank you for being here. Thank you, your boy Roshi. And please go ahead and look in the description and check out those anime reactions. Until next time.